on to our first SERMA vlog. We're very excited to present this with two amazing leaders in our profession and members of our SERMA advisory board. So at SERMA, one of our mission statements is to keep our members on the cutting edge of new developments in the world of sports and entertainment risk and claims and insurance and legal issues. And the good news, and the reason we formed, is because these issues are springing up every single day. New issues that haven't been covered, that aren't being covered elsewhere. You will find those discussions here. And our first one ever is going to be on the slap heard around the world, right?
Type of medical treatment that you're having that will support what you are saying or alleging happened as a result of the incident, in this case, the slap. Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, Illinois, where I am, for example, I'm in Chicago, it also allows for mental, in addition to physical mental. It's very liberal. But you do have to show as a petitioner, as a claimant in my state, as in many states, that your trauma is related to a single defined traumatic event. Now, that's obviously the case here, right? Usually you fight those issues because it's hard to pinpoint which incident caused the trauma. In this case, the whole world saw the event. So the whole world saw your trauma. So this is not one of those cases where you won't be able to prove what the event was, because we have it on tape from many different angles, from all different vantage points.
You don't expect a man to act the way, in the traditional 1950 sense of the word. If they're going for sympathies, that's where I'm looking towards.
Interesting. Rachel, now, if you're on Amber Heard's team and your position is that you didn't defame anyone because you were telling the truth, in that you were the victim of years and years of emotional, physical abuse by Johnny Depp, who would you want on that jury? Who would you not want?
Yeah, I think if you're the plaintiff, you're going to be looking for more politically liberal, progressive, especially socially progressive jurors who have latched on to, for example, the Me Too movement, anyone who has potentially been victimized in their own life. And I don't necessarily mean domestic violence, but any type of victimization, someone with that sort of attitude, someone with what we call an external locus of control, meaning people who believe things happen to them and that bad things can happen to good people rather than you are controlling your own destiny. Often you're going to be looking.
Because David, to your point, of course, what you say in the civil action can be used against you in a criminal action, unless, of course, you invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Right, which is going to put you in a real bizarre place if you're saying someone falsely accused you of a crime and you're going to invoke the possibility of jail time as a privilege against giving testimony in a civil suit. So that's a real difficult choice that a plaintiff has to make in these circumstances. Is you could lose, and you could have a judge come down and say, everything they said you did, you did. The other big issue that's looming under this kind of false element is whether it's actually a statement of fact. As you said, the sportscasters were saying things like he stole money from people that really needed it. He's stealing from the poor people in Mississippi right now. He took money right out of their pockets, things like that. And so there's a real question here as to whether those are statements of fact. It's a little bit like in any sort of fraud case or.
The locker rooms are still widely accepted. What is it about athletics, having been in those locker rooms yourself, the highest level, you played on the Rose Bowl, you played University of Illinois. What is it about those locker rooms that still makes this a breeding ground for this kind of activity?
I think first off, you got to start off with the base component. The base component is that this is part of the human condition, right? We are captured by the past, and we do things the way we've always done them because that's what we know how to do, right? And so many people couch that in traditionalism. Many people couch that in culture. But the truth of the matter is that college sports is no different than some things that you may see in certain fraternities or sororities, or certain things that you may see in some of these secret societies in college. You got a lot of young people with a lot of energy and vigor, and that is not always the best combination. But what also is true is that college football is about, college sports really is about camaraderie in many ways, right? It's about being able to be a part of a team, and many think that to be able to truly be a part of a team, that sometimes that requires a rite of passage of some sort, right? And so We have to have conversations about why it is unacceptable in these spaces. But I also want to say something, Rich. We've not spent a lot of time on this, talking about this in the public kind of domain and public discourse around the allegations at Northwestern, but the NCAA not taking hazing very seriously. You and I can sit down and we probably can rattle off names of prominent people who the NCAA has found a way to suspend, whether it's taking Reggie Bush's Heisman from him or suspending the Ohio State football guys for selling their own jersey. But you never hear about the NCAA suspending somebody for hazing.
Literally the next play or the performance of a single athlete, you're going to find more and more temptations for athletes to change their performance in a game. I used to think, by the way, that athletes like in the NFL or a guy who's making $70 million playing for the Dodgers can't be bribed. I mean, they're making too much money. I think the problem is these are guys who live their lives around sports. That's all they do. And so they begin to think they know more than anyone else. Now, I'm not saying Ohtani did this, but we know there are professional athletes who are gambling. And they believe they know what team is going to win. And so, but they can't bet on it. So they find a friend and they say, go through. And I'm making so much money. I want you to bet $50,000. You bet $50,000 on a game with a legal sports book, the league will find out, even if it's done through a friend. So the friend will go to an illegal bookie and bet the $50,000.
What do we think? Well, do we think Swifties are litigious? Are they, or are they never, ever, never gonna sue their favorite artist?
The price is that high, maybe for a ticket.
We're back, and here's the very shirt I was wearing that day. I wore it with pride that day around Austria, even though there was no show. But I met a lot of Swifties. This is from the Eras tour. See that?
Wow.
So, yeah, we'll have to as a group, guys, go to the next show. I think Jason, you get the tickets this time.
Okay.
I'll take care of them next tour.
As long as it's not in the U.S., I'm fine.
There you go. Let's go around the horn and get the favorite Taylor Swift song from each of our guests. Jason, you're a huge Swift.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Taylor Swift?
You gotta look it up.
This is a tough one. I think I'm going to have to go with Love Story, just because it's my daughter's favorite.
There you go.
They don't have to think about those sorts of things. They're targets in ways that we are not. They're beneficiaries in ways that we are not. But in reality, they have a life they have to live and a tightrope that they have to walk that many of us just can't understand. But what happens is that even though you're a celebrity, not everyone knows you, right? And in this scenario, it's likely that was the case. They didn't probably realize who he was and who they were dealing with. And so the normalcy of their conduct played out in full view. And that normalcy is egregious in our minds. We see what we see. We find ourselves recoiling from the way that they dealt with him, why they had to put their knee in his back and put him on face down on the ground, and that sort of thing. For a traffic citation is just beyond me. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not what policing is supposed to look like. But again, it is something that happens regularly. And so if it can happen to a celebrity, the fastest man in the NFL, if it can happen to a celebrity, one of the greatest receivers that this game knows in the current day, it can happen to a regular person. And so you extrapolate out what the outcome would be to a normal person, to a regular person, non-celebrity, and you realize that it could be much, much worse, and oftentimes it is.
Yeah, ironic. I mean, until recently, until that Kansas City Chief rookie receiver was drafted and set the combine record for, I think, a 4.240. Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's still the reigning fastest man in the NFL, but ironic that Miami-Dade are the only defenders who could possibly stop Tyreek Hill, but they couldn't, right? Because we know that he went out and for the longest touchdown of his career, an 80-yarder in the game just a couple hours later. But Kenan, you are one of the foremost advocates for victims of this type of alleged police misconduct. We want to make sure we don't, make any judgments yet, given that we haven't seen the completion of the investigation. But we know what we know. We know what we saw. Given that you're one of the foremost advocates in this area, what can we see going forward?
Anti-competitive and illegal conduct, or conduct that we allege is anti-competitive and illegal. So again, we're going to be seeking damages for those claims. We'll also be seeking changes, prospective relief. I think what we want for the fighters is for them to have some measure of free agency, like you have in other sports. Right now, the contracts that they sign effectively can last years and years and years. Their careers are very short, 3, 4, 5 years at most at the top level of the sport. If a contract lasts longer than that, they've effectively locked you up for your entire career. So we're going to, what we think will help competition in the industry is if fighters could become free agents much more quickly, then other promotions could spring up, compete for the services of those fighters, and you have true competition. And maybe the UFC either would compete with those other promotions by trying to pay the fighters more, or maybe they would co-promote. UFC would promote one side of a fight, another promotion would promote the other side of the fight. The fighters would make money, the promotions would make money, and the fans would benefit from having better fights with better fighters. So we're hoping that competition between other promotions for the services of fighters will improve the sport, just like what happened in baseball, right? In baseball, you had the reserve clause early in the sport. You had a situation where players almost literally were owned by the team. They could not be traded unless the team allowed them to be traded. And so therefore they had no mobility, they had no leverage, or very little leverage. And the teams could pay them what they wanted to pay them. Once the reserve clause went away, once you had Curt Flood and others challenging the reserve clause in the restrictive contracts and you allowed free agency, fighters had mobility. Teams could compete for them.
Opinion on other art and certainly contemporaries, right? And that's not just specific to music either. But in rap and hip hop, historically, bringing your beef forward through your releases, whether they're singles, whether it's, mixtapes, or it's going live on morning radio in New York or LA, or it's now through streaming services, that's always been part of the culture. So the street cred thing probably takes a knock because your response is supposed to be through your art. If you bring a response for a RICO action through court, it seems like you're not really playing by the rules that we've all agreed are part of the game, right? And the benefit to all of us as fans is that we get to look in and peer into these. Beef is not unique. Now, when I was coming up, it spilled over into violence far too often and really went well beyond artistic expression. But remaining in the realm of artistic expression, there has to be a lot of leeway given to artists to be able to do these types of things, to speak out on things that they think are improper, whether it's actions against them or towards them, or just in general, if they don't like the way people are comporting themselves, well, their art is their expression, and that's their means to do so. Defamation rises to a much different level, right? You have to prove that the person who spoke did so with a knowingness or at least a disregard to likely falseness of what they're saying. It can't be opinion. It likely can't be art either. And as a public figure, again, Drake needs to be careful what he's asking for here. A, he's engaged in these types of beefs before, so he could open himself up for defamation actions against him. But B, he will bring more light to and scrutiny on exactly what it is he claims Kendrick is saying about him, that he thinks Kendrick is presenting as truth. Because an ultimate defense to all of defamation is truth.
If it break that down for us and give us your thoughts on what that liability could look like.
Yeah, happy to. It is really challenging to bring a defamation suit against a news organization. We have decided as a country that we care very much about free speech. We care very much about the public being properly informed about news events that affect them. And anything that has to do with, the public interest, which is defined very broadly, we put stronger protections around suits that have to do with informing the public about those issues than we do about other lawsuits. So in California, there's what's called an anti-SLAPP statute that will apply to this case, I'm sure, which says that when you bring a suit against someone for what we consider to be important free speech, like what the New York Times put in their article, you have to meet a higher standard in your initial complaint to get to the discovery stage. So Baldoni's team will have to show that their defamation claim against New York Times has a substantial basis in fact and law. Usually you just sort of have to allege facts that look like a claim. And if the court says, hey, those are facts that look like probably they would justify a claim, then we can go forward. Here, what Baldoni's team is going to have to do is not just allege those facts, but kind of start the process of proving them up a little bit, not to the same extent they will have to do at the end. But that's part of the reason you see such an extensive complaint from them, is because their burden is going to be higher here. Then what they're going to have to show is that the New York Times published a false statement. They have to be really specific, right? Defamation is statement specific. It can't just be, oh, they said a whole bunch of bad things and that affected my reputation. They have to point to a specific statement, say that was false, and then further prove that the New York Times, when publishing that statement, knew that it was false, or they acted recklessly in publishing it without first confirming that it was true.
Does that pretty much cover what you know too?
I think that pretty much covers what I know. I think what's kind of important to think about when we're looking at like liability and risk assessment of this incident is how these people were positioned on the golf cart. Now, this is what it seems to be from the current reporting. They haven't thrown any pictures out or anything, but this is a two-person golf cart with the holders for the golf bags on the back, right? The ones that strap over on the back. And on that back area where the golf bags are typically strapped in, that's where Jeff Spurback was back there, along with another individual on the back. And then it was John Elway and his wife up in the front. So two-person golf cart, 4 people on it. We can start to see what, where some of the risks might be if we were to look at it, with hindsight being 20/20 and all. But I think that layout of how they may have been in the golf cart will actually help us out a little bit when we start looking to the risks involved and where liability might be placed.
Okay, yeah, and see, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a two-person golf cart. So certainly, from I mean, they're not at this stage, but certainly from a litigation standpoint, that would matter down the road. So,
conferences in the NCAA are basically agreeing to distribute over 90% of $2.7 billion for past damages to the male athletes, 90% to football and men's basketball players, 5% to women's basketball players, and 5% to everybody else. And we, along with the Molo Lampkin firm and others, have objected that this is a straight out Title IX violation. And the conference are saying, and the NCAA are saying, no, it isn't, because Title IX doesn't apply to payments by them as opposed to payments by the school, and to damages payments as opposed to NIL payments. So we'll see. I think the Trump administration changed the rules because it was probably getting enormous pressure from the NCAA and the conferences. Don't muck up our proposed settlement in the House versus NCAA settlement any more than it's already mucked up.
What he went through, the story was that Gilbert O'Sullivan was living on an island somewhere, and he said, no way, no one touches my stuff ever again, right? And so they were dealing with the wrong guy, right? He's not a guy you should have sampled without asking first, because the answer was no. He told you no. You figured, oh, everybody agrees, his label will agree, because the big majors would, I'll give it to you if you give it to me. I'll give you Puffy, but you'll give me Sting, and da-da-da-da, right? But now you're dealing with an outsider, and the outsider says, no, I don't care. And he sued, and he went into federal court, and the judge said, look, I know you guys all think sampling is fine in your business, and that's up to you, but that's a contractual thing. According to the copyright law, what you did was you stole his music. And the number one rule, even above copyright law, is thou shalt not steal. It was kind of a funny decision. And he went off to say, you can't do it. So since then, I think it was in the 90s at some point, sampling became a whole business where contracts and, you had sample clearance companies and all this stuff. So it went from an outsider who said, I'm going to fight to the end, to get his masters back. And then 20 years later, when someone sampled them, he fought. Again, you take somebody who says, I don't care, I'm not making a deal, the law is on my side and I will get what I want. And if you've got the wherewithal to fight a major label, because you also have the money, there's an issue, then you can potentially do it. So a Salt and Pepper or any given artist who doesn't make a deal with their label and says, no, the end game is I want my masters back and I don't care, potentially could set a precedent for everyone else.
Happy 100 episodes of the SERMAPod!
Hi, Shalom from USI. Cheers to 100 episodes.
Hey everyone, Jason DeMarco here. Cheers to 100 episodes of SERMAPod. On behalf of Players Health, congratulations on building a truly impactful platform for our industry. It has been an honor to serve on the SERMA Advisory Board and to be part of this community. Here's to the next 100. Take care, everyone.
Cheers to 100 episodes of SERMAPods from Red Bull's headquarters here in Santa Monica.
Hey SERMA, congratulations on the 100th podcast. It's hard to believe that it's gone by so fast. Before we know it, we're going to have more podcasts than Simpsons episodes. Way to go.
Well, there it is, everyone. Episode 100. It seems like only yesterday that we started the SERMAPod with discussing the legal ramifications of the Will Smith slap. And here we are 100 episodes later, covering what we think are the most cutting-edge issues in sports and entertainment, risk management stories, I should say. And we want to thank, first and foremost, all of you, our listeners and viewers, for tuning in, watching all of our podcasts. We want to thank our sponsor, Magna Legal Services. We want to thank Matt Liller, who is our producer from day one. We want to thank Lisa Stiegel and her team. Lisa is the SERMA marketing director, and the amazing work that she and Matt do behind the scenes is incredible. And of course, once again, we want to thank you. We want to ask you to stay tuned for the next 100 episodes and beyond of the SERMAPod.